Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. Today's guest is the founder and CEO of ZenDrop. And before that, he established a Shopify store that went from 0 to 2 million in sales in just 60 days. He has been featured in Forbes, CNBC, Entrepreneur, and other major publications for his innovative and strategic approach to e-commerce. Recently, he shifted focus from building e-commerce empires to building inner empires. He is passionate about helping new and inspiring entrepreneurs overcome a limiting mindset that stands in the way of their success and guiding individuals to attain inner peace no matter where they are in life. Welcome to the show, Jared Goetz.
Woo, welcome. Thanks for the intro.
Yeah, man, I'm so excited to have you on the show. We had a nice conversation to get going. There's a lot of ways that we can dive into this, but why don't we start with a little bit about your background, because you're young, you're successful, but also you're moving into kind of like what you call inner empire. I love that. And combining these two worlds, which I think is so important. So I'd love for you to just give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I'm a father now. As we were talking before getting started, and we were trying to avoid rabbit holes because it seems like we have lots of alignment in our passions and beliefs and the way we view the world. So I'm excited about this conversation. So first and foremost, I am a father as of 5 weeks ago. I was fortunate to attain some material success when I was younger, in my early 20s. And I was able to, get some of the things that I thought would make me feel happy and fulfilled in life early on, only to find out that there was still an emptiness, still a void, still something that needed to be filled. So really for the last 5-6 years, I've been all in on personal development, spirituality, habits, routines, disciplines, whatever it is that makes me feel energetically how I want my life to be. And as I've been doing that, I've been learning that how you feel really creates the world around you in a way that you can't expect it to. So now I'm really passionate about having these conversations. I've gotten the opportunity to work with and, mentor a lot of younger people that are kind of in that generation after me, in their late teens, early 20s. And I feel like there's a very misguided generation, meaning people kind of have it backwards. They think, hey, I need to go attain these things. They're on social media. I need my life to look like this before I can feel good. They're addicted to the false lives of other people that they portray online, thinking, hey, I need this. Until then, I'm going to scroll. I'm going to have low energy. And one day when I have it, I'll have good energy and I'll feel good. And it's backwards. So really now I'm passionate about having these conversations. Aside from that, I am the founder of ZenDrop. We have over 1 million Shopify merchants on our platform to date, which is a pretty cool achievement. We're about 45 employees or so, not huge, but not small anymore. So I've learned quite a bit through building that business, and just try to live each day and continue to grow where I can.
I love that, man. That's amazing. So I'll go back to one of the first things you said, experiencing material success at a young age. And it's easy to say, if you've never done it, saying, oh, money's not going to give you happiness, right? So when you had that, what was the experience like? Can you say that statement's true for you? And then what was the shift that you needed to make to have both? Because I feel like material wealth is great, and it's great to live in abundance, and it's great to have that ability to thrive and do the things you want. But what I've heard and what I agree with, it just makes you more of the person you are. You get to do these things, but if you don't have the contentment and the happiness for what you have in the moment, then nothing outside of that is going to fix that. It's going to be a nicer car, but you're still going to have the sadness, a nicer, house, and you're still going to have the sadness. So what was it for you exactly, if you could go into that?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I will start off by saying that, by living in abundance, by, feeling those emotions, actually gaining those material things is a byproduct, and it's kind of unavoidable. So that's kind of what I've learned recently. I went through 2 really major shifts in my life. I started my career when I was in my late teens. My first business, I was throwing concerts. I used to throw the world's largest foam party. It was called Electric Flurry. You can still see videos of it online. It was pretty cool.
That's the great beginnings.
It was fun. And, we would book these venues and we would bring in these foam machines and lasers and big artists and DJs and throw these events. And I did my first $1 million when I was 21. And I was living in Miami. I was in a penthouse, kind of like living large in the nightlife scene. I'd cracked the code because I grew up with a single mom, only child, 1-bedroom apartment. She was working several jobs and I always wanted to do more. So I thought I'd crack the code. I figured it out until I was, going on to be 23. I didn't know how to manage the business. I was using ticket sale monies from one show to fund another show. I wasn't grounded. I was go, 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 go. Not much time for reflection, not much time for thinking, just grind, grind, grind. And I grinded my way into a disaster where I basically booked a show that was bigger than I'd ever done before, didn't budget right. Long story short, ended up losing all my money. And on top of that, there was a kid who wanted to be a famous DJ and he had inherited like $50 million. So I made a deal with him. I was like, hey, if you invest in the show, you can play on the main stage and you'll get your pro rata share of the profits. So I lost his money as well. And he sued me for 250 grand. And I have nothing now in my name. Now I have to move back in with my mom. I'm living on her couch. And I basically was living in a reality that did not meet what I thought my life was that I had created in the past, which caused a lot of separation, which caused anxiety, depression, low energy, stress, consistent inner dialogue about how I wish things would be and how I couldn't be happy until they were like that. And that's when I started taking the plunge into trying to learn a little bit about myself. I read a book called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. And it was like my first kind of eye-opening experience to what happens when you treat yourself, your body, your mind the right way. And when I started kind of getting up early, going for walks in the morning and trying to let go and just be present, the universe served me my next opportunity. I got reached out to by a startup that had just raised $10 million. Coincidentally, they wanted to sponsor my shows, but I didn't have any shows to sponsor because I had lost everything. And I basically was like, hey, I'm going to try to do something good for this company. I told them what I think they should do. They ended up asking me to come on and do it for them. And I led the marketing for that company, but we put together a campus tour and we went I lived on a tour bus for 4 months and it was a really crazy time. And we grew the app from 100,000 monthly active users to 10 million monthly active users in 4 months. And so anyway, things were changing in my life. I was able to, I left the company, I sold my shares, I settled my lawsuit, and I went on to kind of my next ventures in life. And there was another pivotal moment that really kind of propelled me into understanding this stuff and wanting to dive deeper. That happened a bit after my first opportunity that came. So I left my job at Yik Yak. I started going out to China to the Canton Fair to find products to sell. And I was one of the first people to bring hoverboards to the US. So I got a big kickoff with e-commerce. I had a bunch of influencers on, I built a big brand. I was talking to Mark Cuban, he was buying the patent on the hoverboards. We were talking about partnering. It never ended up transpiring, but I got into e-commerce and I discovered drop shipping. Drop shipping was really cool because you can sell anything without ever seeing or touching the product and you test a bunch of products. But this is where it gets interesting. So I started a drop shipping store and a friend of mine who was a ex-professional NFL player, Brett Lockett, he was a mentor of mine, someone I looked up to. He was like, hey, Jared, I'm going to a Tony Robbins event. You should come with me. I was like, yeah, I don't really know about Tony Robbins, blah, blah, blah. I was like, that sounds fun. I'll go. And so I go to this event and I just started this e-commerce store. I was doing, maybe a few $100s a day. I go to the event. We do an exercise where it's a visualization meditation where you're imagining yourself as someone else who loves you and cares about you and wants the best for you. So I imagine myself as my aunt. And in this visualization, you're walking into your future life. You're looking in the driveway of your home. You're admiring the cars. You're walking into the house. You're admiring the beauty of the home. You're admiring the photos of your family on the wall. And eventually you walk through the home and you walk into the bathroom and you look in the mirror and it was you the whole time. It was like I had like a kind of an energetic experience where I really loved my future existence for the first time ever. Fast forward, I left the event and my now wife, then girlfriend, we were moving from Los Angeles to Florida. We had a 5-day drive. During that 5-day drive, my store scaled from like a few $100s a day to $50,000 a day in 5 days. And then fast forward about a month later, I'm driving the car that was in my visualization. It was a gray Lamborghini. And I didn't realize until a few weeks after buying the car that it was the exact same car that I had visualized. And that's when I realized I had just manifested something from my mind into reality in a period of time that I would have told you was impossible. I wouldn't have known a way to do it. And that was a big moment that propelled me to figure out more about how all this stuff works.
Wow. Holy crap. Well, that's an amazing story, especially the speed in which it happened. And when I talk about either like the law of attraction or manifestation, one of the first mentors I had was Michael Lozier. So shout out to Michael Lozier. If you're interested in a law of attraction book, get his, because it's very practical. It's based on NLP, and you can kind of problem solve why you may or may not be achieving the thing you want. So I really liked his perspective on it. And one of the things I like to keep in mind is that we don't know. I used to say universe. Now I just like to say God. I feel like that's better, because to me anyway, and this is just my own personal rant, you can, but it's like, if there is a God, then I was created by God, and that just makes me feel better, makes it feel more powerful. So, if we put out this request to the universe of like, I need to get this, and it's got to be done this way. Well, we just have peanut brains, right? We only have a little bit of the sound spectrum, of the light spectrum. Our consciousness only processes a little bit of information, but the mind of God and how that works in all of creation, if we can kind of put it to that, you know what I mean, and line ourselves up, then I feel like we're really merging with that world. And so you've just told a story where you achieve crazy success, and then you're in the visualization, which is really nice. Now, I like your perspective where you talk about the contentment in the process. And I'm curious your perspective, or what you'd say to somebody who's either like kind of tried or failed, or they've gone through more struggles, or it's not as easy. Do you have an inclination of why it happened so quick for you? And if it didn't, how would you stay in a process where you maintain contentment, but you're only making, whatever mundane income as you try to achieve your goals?
Yeah, I think where a lot of people maybe make, I don't want to call it a mistake, but maybe they're kind of not focusing the right way, is they're really focused on the outcomes and how things are supposed to happen. For example, I didn't say I need this car on this day. Didn't happen at all. I had a strong vision in a deep meditation where I had a very clear image of it, and I had a really strong emotional attachment to it because I wasn't looking at it from my own perspective. Sometimes your own perspective will sabotage you. It'll say, "Oh, you're not worthy of that. You've never done these things. You don't deserve that." But since I was looking at it from a different person's perspective, I had no limitations on what I thought I was worthy of because I was from that perspective. I think, a lot of people, they want to manifest things, but that's the problem. They want to manifest it. We need this thing to happen. And when you need something to happen, the universe or God or whatever you want to call it will keep serving you that need. So, if you want to have a baby, for example, and you're like, we need to have a baby, we need to have a baby, we need to have a baby, you're going to keep getting that need to have a baby, right? But if you can, walk in the morning as if you already have, and then let go of the outcome, right? Because like you said, we have peanut brains. I would even say we have so much smaller than peanut that we can't comprehend, because we can't comprehend the complexity of the universe. We live in a universe of unlimited possibilities, meaning there's infinite things that could happen to infinite other things, and there's infinite outcomes. So for us to expect an outcome to happen a certain way is impossible. So I'd say it's really about focusing on the intention and not the outcome, and letting go, focusing on the energy, letting go of the need for the outcome, and letting it happen as it should.
Yeah, I love that. And you brought up a really brilliant distinction in the idea that you experienced it through your aunt's perspective. And one of the things that I'd have when I work with athletes, we want to land a trick. Let's say you're on a snowboard, you want to do a backflip. You're on a skateboard and you want to kickflip this stair or do a trick. You can't do it right now. So you have a belief about the ability to do it. And all I would do when I would do these visualizations with people would be, who's your favorite snowboarder? Who's your
Yeah.
favorite skateboarder? Okay, get into that body. Can you do a kickflip now? Can you do a backflip now? Yeah, it's easy. All right, do it with their style. And so it's so fascinating that it's like our ego and our perspective, and like you said, our belief around worthiness, just a simple sidestep can be so powerful, because in this realm of thought, they kind of say, you need to be able to experience that, what it is fully, right? Experience what it would be like to have all these things and embrace it, like the fake it until you make it, but you really experience it. And it's the same with a backflip too. And I relate everything to sports. So maybe you can't do a backflip on a snowboard, but if I went in your body, I know what it feels like, so I can land one immediately. So you can, through visualization, really accelerate the process for sport. I know that for sure. And the trick is the materialism is engaging in that feeling and getting past that limiting belief, getting past all of those blocks that, say that you're not worthy or whatever the case is. But also, as we've kind of alluded to, is like, can you do it from a state of contentment and fulfillment? And I'm wondering if, like, when you're helping people build their inner empires and outer empires, some people are going to do it a little bit quicker. Some people have to sustain a long struggle. I'm reminded of like the KFC story where it gets like 1,500 no's and eventually he's successful. How do you help people create an idea, continue the contentment if they're engaging in failure, and continuing to move forward?
Yeah, I think a really important concept to grasp in this conversation is that we have a subconscious mind, or you might call it a different word, whatever it is. There's a part of us that's judging everything we do and basically saying, oh, you're great, or oh, you're not that great. So the part that's important is discipline. If you can create habits that you stick to, that part of you that's judging everything and you're doing those things is starting to root for you. Hey, we're great. We're getting up in the morning. We're doing this thing, right? And from that perspective, you start to build confidence. And from that state of confidence, you start to see opportunities that you couldn't have seen without that confidence. So again, when you're focusing on the intention, it's like, have a framework, right? Let's just use running, for example, right? Let's say you're going to go run for the next every morning for the next 14 days. Well, you get up on Monday, you're motivated, you do it. Tuesday, you get up, you're motivated, you do it. Wednesday, you're tired. Your mind tries to convince you not to do it, but you've pushed through and you do it. Thursday comes along, your mind gets even craftier, comes up with all the reasons why you shouldn't. You're going to get sick, blah, blah, and you give into the mind and you don't do it. Friday comes along. Well, I didn't do it yesterday. I might as well start on Monday, right? And then Monday comes along, whether you do it or you don't do it, your subconscious is like, you were a guy that could do it until Thursday. So when a huge opportunity comes your way, you're not going to see it because you're not worthy in your own mind to be able to do that thing that came to you as an opportunity. On the other hand, if you push through on Thursday and you did it, Friday you pushed through, you did it, 14 days in a row you got up and ran, your subconscious now looks at you as someone who deserves whatever it is they want to do, as someone who will do whatever it is they say they're going to do. And when those opportunities come to you, you're going to see them. And your mind is going to manifest the thoughts that are in alignment with your confidence levels. So I would say if it's taking a long time, whatever it may be, you have to just stick to the disciplines, stick to the habits, build the confidence. Your mind will bring you the thoughts that'll bring you there.
Yeah, I love that perspective. And it reminds me of a perspective around confidence that said, you lack confidence or you lack self-worth because you keep breaking agreements with yourself. And I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. And so if you think about, weight loss, for example, it's going to take a little bit of time. But if you can track that over time, you're going to notice that you're going to get a result, but it's not going to be immediately. And also the other thing to consider is with the subconscious mind and habits and things like that, it takes anywhere, between like 14, probably more, closer to 21 to 28 days to really make it a habit. It's just like when people stop going to the gym, the hardest thing is getting back. But once it's a part of their pattern, they're able to go consistently and get the results that they want. And I'm curious from your perspective, when you started to look at the inner world, you went to Tony Robbins. We talked about that. You also went to Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's very fascinating, has a very interesting work. You've done explorative plant medicine. So you kind of did the gamut and you were able to apply it to your life and improve it. I'm curious, from that journey, were there habits, disciplines, or perspectives that really stood out that helped you really transform your life to create the person you are now?
Yeah. So I've tried, you name the habit, I've probably tried it. The meditations, the exercises. I have a sauna and a cold plunge that I here at my house I use regularly. The breath work. I've tried every habit in the book. I'm also pretty obsessed with efficiency, meaning, what's the least amount I can do for the greatest output, or what's the least amount of energy I could expend for the greatest output. And I've boiled down my favorite habit, which is a walking formula that I use on a daily basis that kind of takes a bunch of different components, things that I learned from Joe Dispenza, things that I've learned from the Tony Robbins stuff, things that I've learned from the plant medicine retreats, things that I've learned from all this stuff. I've boiled it down into a formula that's actually been really useful for me. I could share it with you. I call it the perfect walk formula.
You just muted. Oh, wait, hold on one second. That's my computer just things. My apologies, everybody. Oh,
can you hear me?
You're welcome.
I'm sorry, everybody. Siri just pops in. Okay, sorry, keep going.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I've basically came up with this walking formula that's been really good for me. I'll share it with you. For me, it's the one habit that I can do every day that essentially activates the different energies that I need to create what I want to create in life. And the way it goes is you go on a walk, and it's, about 30 to 45 minutes long. And I break it down into 5 different parts. The first part of the walk is opening your heart. So you get music that goes along with it, right? So you get a song, a beautiful song, you focus your attention right in the middle of your chest. You can anchor on to a thought that, brings up the emotions of love, whether it's your family or something you've done that you remember that brings up really beautiful feelings. And for the first 5 minutes or so, you're really focusing on opening your heart. The second 5 or 10 minutes is you're focusing on your power and your strength, and you're walking and you're feeling big and strong and you can do anything, right? You're building your power. The third part is a moment of letting go and being present and letting go of any thoughts that come into your mind, noticing the things around you, the plants, every step you take, the breaths you take, just be totally present in the moment. The fourth part is where you connect with a higher power. So whatever it is you believe in, if you believe in God or you believe in some kind of divine universe, you walk and you feel connected. You feel greater than yourself. You feel your attention and your energy expanding very far beyond yourself. And the fifth part is a moment of celebration where you're like, hey, I got up and I did this for myself today. And you're feeling your energy raise and your vibration raise. And at that point, typically I'll get goosebumps, which means I felt the emotion I wanted to feel. And that habit, by the end of that habit, I'm like, okay, I've activated this stuff. I felt all the emotions I want for the day. Now it's time to let go and let the universe happen how it needs to happen. And typically my thoughts for that day will flow in, ideas will flow in, creative ways of doing things will come to me that would not have came to me if I just got up and started scrolling on my phone and went back into my routines. So that habit specifically is something I've derived. And I think it's a pretty pretty cool habit to do.
That's incredible. I'd love to dive into that a little bit. I had sorry, man, I'm blanking on his name, but Daniel Krenzel. He created the God Walk app, and I started to do that. Before that, I was familiar with Dr. Joe Dispenza's morning walks, and I was really good at emoting through motion. And when I was at a festival once, I had the idea of a manifestation dance. So everything that you want, you feel it through dance. And it's a way to like express or get into the feeling, because that's what we're trying to do, get into the feeling. And I'm curious, in your process, is there a step in there where you're doing like the Tony Robbins thing, where you're trying to imagine the life as you want it, like the things that you're trying to create? Which step is that? Or are you just trying to get to the celebration of like gratitude for existence?
Yeah, for me, the whole time is trying to get the feeling. So I'm not really trying to visualize. I'm not really trying to think. But as I'm getting the feelings, the thoughts naturally come in. The vision may pop in, or an epiphany may pop in. But for me, I'm strictly focused on those feelings, on the love, on the power, on the letting go, on the connection and the celebration. And through that, the ideas, the visualizations just kind of naturally come.
I love that. I think that's brilliant. And I think that with the God Walk app specifically, and you mentioned this in your process, which is very similar, it's the connection to the divine, like, you know what I mean? And a connection with yourself. And that's how you start your day, because most people, when they wake up, they are already being dragged along from their habits and their past experiences, and they don't have that time for yourself. And if you feel like there isn't a moment in the day, this process is even more important. It's more imperative, because you will never ever get off that hamster wheel unless you're able to create that space to think, that time to think and commit to that. So that's what's going to be required.
Yeah. And a lot of people think they get this feeling once and they get this realization once, right? And then their mind, when the next day comes up, it's like, oh, well, you already had that realization. We're good. We don't need to do it again. Right. And it convinces you, because your mind wants you to be comfortable, wants you to stay in the known, and then you won't continue the habit. But if you find that if you do it again and you realize, right, the word realize I'm using because it's not a thought. It's not, you're not figuring something. You're realizing what you really are through the process. And when you realize it, you realize that it's way deeper than what your mind was telling you it was. So oftentimes you'll be like, oh, well, I did it yesterday. I already know what the outcome is. I don't need to do it today. But when you do it again, you're like, oh, okay, this is why I did it. And I think it's super important that every single day you remember and you realize what it is we are and what it is our purpose as humans are, and you let go. Because like you said, you wake up and all your problems start coming in, all your thoughts from yesterday started coming in. You start looking at your phone and you're getting distracted and you're back in the exact same cycle. How do you expect change to happen when you're in the exact same energetic frequency that you were in yesterday? So you have to take that time, and it doesn't have to be the walk. I like the walk. It's fun. It's enjoyable. And you also get some exercise with it. Whatever it is, the solitude, first thing to realize what it is our purpose is as humans, I think is a major key.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And the consistency, like anything, is key. It's like going to the gym and getting stronger. It's like eating well, whatever the case is. It's not one day, it's compounded over time. That analogy they give where, would you rather have $1 million in 30 days or 1 cent doubled every day? You can think about that in the terms of your energy, your energetic well-being, your contentment. And I'm curious, in your position, how do you use this when stressful situations happen? Stress or anxiety, if people struggle with that, what do you recommend they do? Because if you are an entrepreneur or you just are alive, most people are stressed and anxious and life is frustrating. And so as these things occur, what's your perspective around that to just maintain a stress-free life when it's like, oh, here's this big deal. Oh, crap. It's all gone to crap again. What do I do?
Yeah. I don't think it's necessarily about maintaining a stress-free life. I think stress and anxiety is part of life, right? It's about not trying to reject it. It's about not trying to push those thoughts out of your head and trying to make everything right so you feel okay. It's like, for me, it's like whenever I feel stressed or anxious, I look at it as an opportunity to take a second and bring my attention back to the present moment and realize in this very moment right now, everything's perfect. The only place that's not perfect is in my projected future, that's not even real, and in the anxieties or stresses from the past. So when stressful times come up, it's like, okay, perfect opportunity to realize what I am, to bring yourself to this moment and just remember that oftentimes we project our worst case scenarios into the future all the time. We think about situations like, imagine you have to go do a speaking gig or something and you have a fear of speaking. Your mind is imagining you getting up there and getting all clammy and sweaty and people laughing and you're using this, you're bringing that stress into this moment instead of enjoying this moment. So when stress or anxiety comes up, it's an opportunity to remember. It's an opportunity to bring yourself back into the seat of awareness, into the seat of consciousness, and become aware that you're not your stress, you're not your thoughts, you're not your body even. You're the being, you're the consciousness that experiences it. And when you can remember that, everything melts away and there's a bliss that comes out of that really isn't found anywhere else. So when stress or anxiety comes up, it's an opportunity to get back into that space.
I love that tip. It reminds me of something that I would share with a lot of clients that I have, where I would say, imagine the thing that's on repeat, whether it's anxiety, depression, frustration, anger. And so for a bit there, for me, I had to use it for anger because I was getting super frustrated. And so that was my trigger that I'd have to say, oh, well, now is to come back to, the present moment. It's an opportunity because it's the thing that's happening the most. And with awareness, you can reset that. You don't have to stay there. And it's not so bad that it happened. It's just the practice of it. It's the remembering of it. And I remember studying enlightenment thinking, okay, great. I'm going to get to this emotional and mental state where I'm floating on the clouds and everything is hunky dory. And I don't know really anyone that's achieved that. I've heard a story where somebody who has dropped stress, which is amazing, and I think he did, and it's possible. However, for most of us, it's a practice, and I love that perspective on it. And I'm curious, in the notes they gave me, I don't know if you talked about this already, but you talk about life principles to achieve this success. And I'm curious if you touched on that because I love the idea of just a guiding principle to move forward, a framework to navigate and experience life.
Yeah, I think that answer changes all the time. Like you said, it's a practice, right? It's like something that I may have thought a year ago is not what I think today. I'm evolving every day, turning into a different person every day. So I don't necessarily have any, principles that I live by that I'm like, you need to have these principles. I do think that having frameworks, though, is really important. For example, have you heard of 75 Hard?
Yes.
So I'm doing 75 Hard right now for the fourth time. I've done it 3 times before. And for me, it's a framework, right? It's a challenge for anyone who doesn't know what it is. It's 75 days. You work out twice a day for 45 minutes each, drink a gallon of water, you read 10 pages of a book, you take a progress picture, there's no alcohol, and you stick to a diet with no cheat meals for 75 days in a row. And when you don't have a framework, at least for me and for a lot of people I know, you run into situations where you have inner conflicts, where, there's a version of yourself that was inspired. Maybe it's a Sunday night and you're feeling really good for the week and you're excited to do these things. And there's your true self that wants something. And then when the time comes to do it, your mind kicks in and you have an inner conflict where it's like, oh, well, yeah, we wanted to do that thing, but we don't really need to do it right now. And then you have to use energy. You have to expend energy to win that battle. And winning that battle is really important. So when you have a framework, it allows you to expend less energy to win those battles. So when the conflict comes up, hey, should I read right now? Or I could just watch Netflix and go to sleep. Well, when you're doing 75 Hard, it's already decided. So you might have a very tiny conflict, but it's like, well, I have to do it or I got to start from day one. So having frameworks of discipline that you stick to, I think is a really kind of key to building discipline, building confidence, and moving forward.
Yeah, I believe so too. And there's a rougher example of that where the Soviet weight training, when they broke all the records, they'd have people living in dorms and eating certain meals, and there's nothing outside. This is the only thing you're doing. So it simplifies life. And even when I train with the Shaolin monks, everything is out there and it really simplifies your choices. I think that's important. And I'm reminded of something that Stephen Kotler said when he was on the podcast about he makes his to-do list, right? And so throughout the day, it's already done. And he knows he's working for the higher self. He's knowing for his best interest that he's thought about, that he's decided. And I think the challenge for most people is that they haven't got really clear on where they want to go, their highest priorities. And even if they don't get to that step of planning. And then really the simple mastery is to be able to execute that daily plan over and over and over again and sticking to it and not letting the mind take over. And the 75 Hard is such a great tool and framework to do that. And even if you did it for 30 days or 60 days, you can try the mini version, but it's a nice duration of time because 3 months committed to anything, you're going to transform whatever. You're going to have a degree of success in whatever. And I can, as you're relating that, just know in my own world, how my mind likes to find ease and comfort rather than doing the thing that my higher self or the thing I really want needs to get done.
Yeah, I think another really cool tool is giving your mind or that version of you that doesn't necessarily align with your higher self, giving that version of you a personality, a nickname. It's like, I think, I don't know if you know Brian Johnson, he's got Blueprint. He's reversing his aging. He calls it his rascal version of himself, or, you identify that version of you and you're like, you write out what are those, what's that person's habits? Well, it's like, no, that person wants to sleep in, that person wants to eat late, that person wants to be comfortable, that person doesn't want to work out. You identify that. And then you identify what's your true self and your highest self. And you know that your highest self needs to win all the battles. So when that version of you comes in, that personality comes in, it's like, okay, like we know how that game works and we don't need that. And really understanding that it's weird because we grow up and we think we're just one person, right? But there's many parts of us that are all working towards our end goal in life. And identifying that mind that doesn't want the best for you is going to try to sabotage your own habits. And by identifying it, you're preparing yourself for what it's going to bring you. And that way, when it comes up, you're able to shut it down quickly. And then also realizing that every time you win one of those inner conflicts, you're giving a point to your higher self and you're taking away a point from that, rascal version of yourself, whatever you want to call it. But every time you lose, you're giving a point to that person and you're giving that person power, and it gets even harder and harder to win. So every time you win a battle, it's a victory. It's something that you should celebrate. And it's something that is going to bring you more abundance in life. And recognizing that's, I think, really important.
That is an absolutely phenomenal tool. And the only other person that I know that articulated something similar was my friend Mark England from Procabulary. And he gets people, he calls it like the victim mentality. And he might have changed it to something else, but it's like this inner version of you that's the lower self. You give them a name and like how they act and all these different things. And the nice thing about that is the awareness for when it comes up, when a decision needs to be made. Right. And so we're not recognizing that we have this inner battle, like you said, over micro decisions each and every day. And then you space that out over time, you're going to get a result. Right. And so whatever your biggest thing is you're struggling with, and I like using weight or fitness as an example because it's so clear, the results, but you can be very overweight and you never worked out in years and have only eaten crap. And you say, okay, 75 hard. You know what that inner self says about working out, about exercising, about diet. And the only commitment you make for the next 75 days is to walk, a mile or something, and then it'll get easy. So you're going to walk the mile, then you're going to have a healthier diet. You figure out what that is, right? And then you do that for 75 days. You'll be a totally different person, but you're on this cycle and hamster wheel. And the first thing is the awareness piece. And if you can see it as it comes up so that you're able to have a battle, an inner battle and know that choice, it's so handy.
Yeah. And, when you can bring yourself to be aware of those two parts of you, it gets easier and easier over time. You get stronger, you get better, you build the confidence. It's like, but the problem is, most people are just going through the cycles in life. They're getting up, they're going right into their previous days, and they're giving points. They're giving points to that version of themselves that's their lower self. They're giving that version of themselves power. So getting off the ground is a bit hard. At first, there's a lot of motivation. You can get started, but it's really hard to, really get the momentum that you need. And then the other thing is like, you're not going to be perfect, right? Like we're going to fail some of our habits here and there. You're not going to stick to everything you say you're going to do. You're going to fall off. So it's almost as important as sticking to your habits as how fast can you rebound? Because if you fall off, it's really easy to say, okay, well, I'll just start again next week or next month or next year or never. Right. And if you look at it, like the way I like to look at it is like, let's just say life is really simple. It's a progress curve, right? When you stick to your habits, you grow. When you don't, you decline. If you're sticking to your habits and you fall off and you rebound right back up, you're only a little bit below where you started and you can get right back on the track. But every second that you stay down here, the next time you start, you're starting lower and lower and lower, and you're almost starting back at ground zero at a certain point. So I think the rebound concept, how fast can you jump back on the horse when you fail? Because we will fail. No one's perfect. I'm far from perfect. I fail things all the time. But then when I fail, I remember, I'm like, just get back on it. Just get back on it. I understand the importance of getting back on it. And that allows me to get back on that path and continue to make progress.
Yeah, I think that's a really great perspective as well, because I think some people take falling off as failure. And what successful people know is that quick rebound. We learned this in martial arts, and I actually learned it from one of my boxing coaches. And one of his big things was when you're going through the exercises is no space in between, get to the next one. And Stephen Kotler, actually, even before our first interview, he said, when I got better at peak performance, it was smaller gaps toward the next task. And so these people who have gotten to the level of mastery are simply just doing the things that their highest versions of themselves have thought out and have planned, and now they're executing on it. And people who are not as successful are allowing that inner dialogue to, influence them to make the choices that aren't aligned with what they truly want. And they get into like laziness and comfort, and it's part of our nature. So it's coming up with a plan to mitigate that and do more of the things that we want.
Yeah, I think one thing we didn't even really dive into so much is the importance of planning. If you look at us as humans, we have a certain amount of energy we can expend each day. And the energy might grow as you grow and you get healthier, whatever, but you have a certain amount of energy. And most people spend most of their energy on working and mindless activities. So they're just working, and then they're scrolling or playing video games or whatever it may be, and a very small sliver on planning. Maybe they plan the thing, a doctor's appointment, or okay, I have a meeting, and they plan that. I think that the greatest achievers, the people that I've been able to interact with that have created lives that I really look up to, they take a big slice of that energy and they put it into the planning. I learned something from, do you know Robin Sharma, 5 a.m. Club? I'm fortunate to be a friend. He's a friend of mine. I spent some time with him in Barcelona in December. We were talking about planning and being excellent and things like this. And, one of the habits I derived from learning from him was on a Sunday, you take 2 hours first thing in the morning. You get up, you go make a coffee, you go to your desk, you have a notebook. First hour is all about reflecting. So you think about your previous week. You can even open your calendar and look at what you did the previous week and relive the moments and say, hey, how was I during this moment? What kind of behaviors was I doing, right? Okay, and you mark, for me, I use a 4-colored pen, so I'm writing this stuff out. And if something I did was a behavior that I didn't love, I'll circle it in red. And if it was something I loved, I'll circle it in green. And I'm going through my previous week and I'm reflecting. That way, when the week's coming up, I'm already aware of my behavior patterns and I can try to make them better the next week. So you're reflecting on the previous week. You're becoming aware of the things that you did that weren't so good, that were good. And you're really gearing yourself up for, okay, now I know where I was last week. What do I want this week to look like? I take maybe 5 or 10 minutes and I write out, I just go right from the brain to the pen and paper, just everything I want to do for the week, whether it's implementing habits, certain things I already do. Maybe it's a certain way I want to be. I want to be more compassionate, more present, whatever it is, I just write it all out and then open up the calendar. And I start with the personal habits and routines. So I'll start with the morning routine, the workouts, what I'm eating, when I'm eating it, all the things that I don't want to have inner conflicts for. I start with that. And then I put all the work in. So I put work second, because I know that in being the best version of myself, the output of my work will be much better. So I think we didn't really touch on the planning so much, but the planning is what gives you the clarity, and the clarity gives your true self more power to win the battles over your mind. So planning is something that you can keep getting better at planning as you go. Every Sunday, you can look at, okay, how did I plan last Sunday? What can I do this Sunday that's even better? And another little micro planning exercise at the end of the day, you sit down for 15 minutes, after you eat dinner, before you're going to go to bed, whatever it may be, you run through your day. Same thing. I use the 4-colored pen. I look through all my meetings, my conversations. If I did something impulsive, maybe I was like, I don't want to drink so much coffee today, and I ended up having a 3rd coffee or 4th coffee. I'll circle that in red. And then I'll just rate my day. I'll give myself anywhere from an F to an A. Typically, I never get above a B. And it's because I always have something in the day that I did that wasn't aligned with my truest self. But it allows me in the morning to recall how I behaved the day before and try to be a little bit better. So it's like the Sundays are for major planning, and the nights are for micro planning. And that's been a really kind of great subset of habits that have helped me a lot for planning.
That's a really great tool for advice because it's intentional for what we're planning throughout the week. And then it's also reflective. And one analogy I like to share when I'm helping people is like when you're trying to design your life on purpose, it's like an open sea, right? And so in this analogy, each week or potentially even each day, if you want, you're just course correcting. You're seeing the things that that you preferred, right? And then you're being intentional with where you want to go. And then upon that reflection, it's like, oh, I need to kind of adjust this a little bit, or this wasn't working out. And so that process is so amazing to prevent us from going in unconscious modes. And that's really what the subconscious wants. It's really what our lower self wants. It wants peace. It wants ease. It doesn't want conflict. You know what I mean? And it really can tend to go towards like, I don't know if it's like sloth, but it's very lazy, right? We get into this rut almost, but it's because we're not reflecting. We're almost unconscious, as you'll see when your son grows up a little bit, if you put a kid in front of a TV, it's dead time. Their brains just zone out. And we can really do that as adults. And we're dealing with issues now with television and Netflix and phones and iPads and all these new challenges that we need to learn how to navigate effectively so we can get what we want, because we really don't want to be lazy. We really don't want to drink too much. We really don't want to be in stress all the time. So sometimes, like when you were talking about the 75 hard, it's hard, but like really it's not if you compare to a really hard thing. It's hard like mentally and emotionally what you're going through just to make the right choice, which is really interesting. Like I can even think for myself would be like, I went golfing. I know you went golfing today, and like I can't drink a beer after golf. It would be hard because I would have a conflict of wanting to drink a beer with my buddies. But in reality, all I'd have to do is drink a water. So it's not like the hardest thing ever. You know what I mean? It's like this inner hard.
Yeah, it's identifying that your lower self wants short-term pleasure, right? Your higher self wants long-term joy. And we have so many avenues to gain short-term pleasure at our fingertips at all times that never existed before. And not only do we have them at our fingertips, obviously I'm talking about our phones and our technology that we're consistently distracted by. Not only do we have them, but the biggest companies in the world are paying the smartest people in the world to figure out how to get you to get as much dopamine from these interactions as possible so you get addicted to them. So it's not just it's not just hard because, you have to make the decision. It's hard because you're battling the society that wants you doing this. And they want you doing it from profit, right? And there might be other agendas, and that's a rabbit hole. And I don't really know what those agendas are, but they definitely want profit. Facebook, Instagram, they want you on there. So when you go on Instagram, they're going to serve you everything that causes you to continue to, they use trillions of data points to figure out, Facebook, for example, looks at you as a bundle of data. You're a man, you're in your 30s, you live here, you have a beard, whatever, all these data points. And it looks at millions of other people's with the same data points. It looks at exactly what they're clicking on. It looks at what they're looking at the longest. It serves you those things. It tests what's working. It serves you other things. It finds out what keeps you on it, what makes you open it the most, and it keeps feeding it. It keeps testing things until it gets you more and more addicted to it. So you're battling against the smartest people in the world, spending as much money as they could to keep you addicted to it. And then it's hard to replace that dopamine with other things. So when you don't do that, now you're like, oh, well, I'm going to run or going to walk or eat healthy. Your mind is now like suffering from a depletion of dopamine. And when you don't have the dopamine, your mind's pitying yourself. Oh, for me, like, I feel like shit. I don't have dopamine, right? So it is hard. But when you break free of the cycle and you recognize it, you can almost use that as like you can almost get mad at it and then and reject it because of what it's doing to you. So it's hard because you're battling a machine that's supposed to keep you on it. And if you do detox from it a bit, and you don't need that dopamine, and you can replace those dopamine hits with things that are good for you, a cold plunge, a sauna session, reading a book, it becomes easier and easier. And then you could, when short-term pleasures come up, it's easier to deny them because you're not starving for dopamine. The chocolate cake looks good, but you're not starving for dopamine. So you can reject it knowing that the future fit body, healthy body, clear energy person that didn't eat the chocolate cake that feels joyful is worth it. So recognizing the pleasure and joy perspective is important. And And really, honestly, getting angry at the system is a cool tool to push it away.
Yeah, I agree. And I love all that. And if you look at gambling addictions and people who are kind of stuck in that, it is designed to keep you there. So it's challenging in the mind. And that's why it's a mental battle. It's an emotional battle. It's kind of like a spiritual battle because it's really vying for your attention. And that's what we have. We want to be deliberate and intentional with where we put our attention. Otherwise, there's all these forces coming to take that attention, and that's your life. And in Stoicism, they talk about a live time and dead time, and the dead time is just zoning out, watching TV, scrolling. And so if you can either do a detox. And that's why so many people, if they're trying to quit drinking, they're trying to quit gambling, they're trying to do these things, they need to go cold turkey and separate into a brand new environment, because those mental hooks are so strong. And so you can just be like, you know what, just assess your situation. Like, this is strong, like, holy smokes. Right. So, maybe you can just delete one app, or maybe you try a week without these tools, whatever you got to do. Just know how far gone you are, which can be really challenging. That's why there's interventions and things like that. But I could see even now or in the short future, people helping people with social media addiction, even too much television. When we were kids, and I'm just a little bit older than you, so you probably had this, but it was, don't watch too much TV, and don't stick your face right there. And we only had like cable. Now it's like every device is available to give you everything you want, plus YouTube, plus social media, plus video. I got one console as a kid and 2 channels. It wasn't as bad to make me go outside and play hockey and get outdoors. So the game has changed, and we just need to recognize that. So we're being intentional with what we want to do with our time.
Yeah, I mean, most of the world's greatest achievers were around before this time. The Albert Einsteins, right? The Benjamin Franklins, the inventors, the Nikola Teslas. They didn't really have anything to distract themselves. So they were able to think about things for days, weeks, months, years at a time. The average person today watches a video for, I don't remember the amount of time, 6 or 7 seconds. You're training your mind to have a very short attention span. How do you expect to be able to focus on a big problem and see it all the way through when you're consistently training your mind to have, very quick hits of dopamine and on to the next thing? I delete Instagram off my phone all the time. I'll re-download it because I want to check my DMs or make a post. And I'm still kind of figuring out what's the best way of being able to utilize social media without being addicted to it. And when I delete it, I'll notice that there's certain things during the day that trigger me to want to open it up. Whether it's like, okay, when I first get in my car, or like when I sit down on the couch, or when I get on my computer, and I'll notice that there's patterns in my life that trigger me to want to open the app. And one time I did an experiment. I was like, all right, today, every time Instagram pops in my mind, I'm going to just take a note of what it was that made me want to open it. And there were so many different parts of the day where I was like, oh wait, I don't have Instagram. Let me just write this down. And there were so many patterns. So now not only are you addicted to it, but then you start to associate parts of your day with getting the dopamine from the social media. So when that part of the day comes up, or that environment that you're in, it triggers you to want to go do that thing. So it's actually, you're pulling the addiction from just the thing into your daily life and your routines. So changing an environment's a good habit. But the important thing is just being aware of this, because a lot of people talk about the detriment of being addicted to technology. And, it's something that's being talked about, but it's not really being taken seriously enough. I think that, the war on drugs, great. There should be a war on people's attention spans being profited on. I mean, it's not a healthy thing, but it's not really being taken seriously. I mean, because it's so new, I think. I mean, I don't really know what the long term is on this, but now you take what we have now, and then you take AI and you take quantum computing, which is billions of times faster and smarter than our current computers, which are just as smart as humans. What's going to happen to our attention span when we have virtual worlds that are more pleasurable to be in than the real world? I mean, where does that lead? I don't know. I don't have the answers to it, but it is a freaking weird thing to think about.
Yeah, we are moving into some interesting times. And I remember the first time being in an VR headset, and it was scary It was like a scary game my cousin had. And the immediate thing I thought was, oh crap, like this body is in the simulation, because all you need to do is get a haptic suit. And if you put that on somebody while they were sleeping, and this is only maybe, this might be in existence and we don't even already know about it. However, someone's sleeping, you just drug them up, you put that thing on, you put a haptic suit on. It would be so hard to tell the difference between that virtual world and the real world. And that's really where whatever the powers that be are leading us to this artificial world where we're not really getting back to nature, getting back to ourselves. And, meditation, that's real. We're going into our inner world, to our innermost selves. Being bored, there's an importance to that. We have time to think and process and reflect. Is an important part of life. Being out in nature is so important and key. And there's a book called Jesus and the Essenes, and it says there's 4 ways to know God: a great teacher, study, meditation, and nature. And, these are, so the importance of just getting back to what's real and not going into the artificial, which is always pulling you in through dopamine. It's like our mind is like got this opportunity to be in Vegas, and it's all the shiny, it's all the things pulling you in. So it is a challenge, and it starts with awareness and then just trying to make better choices to bring us where we truly want to go over a long term and not that short term fix, like you said earlier.
Yeah. And while you were speaking, I remembered something I had seen recently. There was a guy who, I think he tried to figure out how to make the most realistic virtual reality experience with what exists today. So he got the best headset, the best headphones, the haptic suit. He got a stationary treadmill, and he got like some kind of like body suit, and he even got a smell machine where you would smell something and and he said after 20 minutes in there, that was his reality. And then it brings you down it brought me down a thought pattern where it was like, well, what we're experiencing, how do you define that as reality, right? Because what we're seeing right now, I'm not actually seeing this. I'm seeing light bouncing into my eyes, and then my eyes telling me what this is. Same thing with what I'm touching. I'm touching vibration. Matter is not even matter. It's 99.999% empty space and atoms. So I'm touching vibrations. Sound is vibrations going in through my ears where my brain processes it. And same with smell. It's coming through my nose, my brain's processing it. So how do you really define reality? And it's like, well, when virtual reality gets that good, where you could see it as clearly as where we are now, you could hear it as good, you can touch it, taste it, smell it as good. How can you really tell the difference? And anyway, I don't know the answers to that too, but you would argue that in 100 years, with the rapid exponential growth of technology, the way that we've been able to grow in the last 50 years, where we're going to be in 100 years, we can't really comprehend. But we may be in a point where you're in virtual reality, and then you go into another virtual reality within virtual reality, and it's a never-ending kind of simulation. I think they have a simulation. I think Elon Musk talks about that, where it's like technically, if you go down that rabbit hole, it's impossible that we're not currently in a simulation, because of the timeline. But technically. So I don't know. That's just an interesting rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's a super fascinating rabbit hole. And there's the what do they call it? Not the cybernetics, but something like that. They want to put a chip in your brain and all these different things. And we don't know where it's going to lead in 5 and 10 years. But I think that it goes back to the importance of our connection with ourselves and God and our true and highest selves, because otherwise that could very well be a trap. It might sound good, it might look good, but it might create a result that we don't want. And it could be a choice. How much do you want to engage in this? Just like social media and TV and all these new things, we have an opportunity to engage. But as we engage, we're experimenting because we're curious creatures. What do we really want to build? And when you go back to simple, as I get older and I've a father, what's really becoming apparent is the importance of being like a good father and having a good family and connected to good community over dinner, over going to the park, over going outside in nature, just this simplicity where you have this artificial world that is very captivating. And we just need to be aware of that, because like anything, it can be overused and it can become harmful for us. So that's what we're kind of navigating, this very exciting but almost dangerous progression. And I think it will make it even more important to come back to simplicity, because when you interview or talk to old people who've lived a full life, it'll always go back to the simple things that brought them joy, that brought them peace, and that brought contentment. And so we can learn from that and try to apply it as we get, an ever evolving Las Vegas of dopamine features that are all around us.
Yeah, that's why I think it's so important to have these conversations, to have these interactions, for people to be able to see things like this, because as the future generations grow up, their reality is going to be based on all this stuff we're talking about. I mean, in 50 years, you're going to have people that are more technology than they are real. We have artificial organs, hearts. Eventually we're going to have artificial brains that you can transplant in people. Like, that will be a thing where we become more technology than real. So anyway, I don't know what creation will happen the way it will happen. Consciousness will continue to manifest in whatever way it may be. We do have peanut brains. We don't really know anything about how, God's plan is to continue to manifest into the reality that we think we're in. But we do know that we want to feel good. We want to feel loved. We want to feel fulfilled. I think that's what people are looking for. So those rabbit holes will continue to happen, and I'm very curious to see how that plays out. But yeah, talking about this stuff is very important.
Yeah, I agree. And the last thing that you said there, I think, is important, because those are the things that we want to feel: love, contentment, connection, empowerment, faith. And that all comes from the inner world. And so this, this option for the outer world, however that's going to evolve, I do think it's almost like not a trap, but something that's not going to lead to long-term, sustainable, true fulfillment, right? Just like the pursuit of materialism only, the pursuit of some sort of thing, right? The artificial world, it's, a video game is never going to give you true fulfillment, and no amount of money is going to give you true fulfillment. No virtual reality where you're the king and it's going to give you true fulfillment. It will be temporary, and it's nice and it's very enticing, but what we want are those other things. And I think that we have to really sit down with ourselves and figure out what that is for each of us. And then you gave so much practical advice: plan it out, reflect, refine. It's okay to make mistakes, keep going. And yeah, man, this has been amazing. I appreciate this. It's so practical. I learned a lot. So is there anything that you wish that I'd asked or that you want to talk about before we close this show?
I think we touched on a lot of really good things. I mean, it's important to keep having these conversations. It's important to keep raising awareness, because people won't realize that they've been on the wrong path until it's too late. Like you said, old people, they get to their deathbed and they say, hey, I wish I was a better father. I wish I spent more time with my family. I wish I was more compassionate. They don't say, I wish I gambled more. I wish I, spent more time doing things that brought me short-term pleasure. I haven't spoke to that many people on their deathbed, but based on what I've heard, people are always talking about how they wish they had more of these inner, peace and more inner joy and the things that we're discussing. So I appreciate you having me on and opening these topics and doing something that's really good for the world.
Well, I appreciate you very much. Where can people find you if they want to follow you, they want to check out Zen Drop, they want to follow what you're doing? Where do they go?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Jared Goetz. I have my podcast launching. It's called Zen Hard. We just recorded our first 2 episodes, and you can check that out. That'll be pretty fun. We're going to be interviewing world-class achievers and deconstructing their inner worlds and coming up with practical tools and tactics and habits for people to use in their own lives. And I try to be pretty responsive on social media. I do delete Instagram for most of the week. But I try to get back to most of my DMs when I can. And I'm looking forward to getting more connections.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the work you're doing. This has been a great episode, so I appreciate it.
Amazing. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, guys.